Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, join the community forum and of course attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to another episode number, I can't remember, is it 9?
It's number 9.
Episode 9.
Number 9.
How things going for you, Zach, in your part of the world?
Oh, they're going great. It's fall, and I love it in Seattle in the fall. It's my favorite part of the year.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record. We do feel like we're in a little bit of suspended animation as we wait for the election. But that's kind of on my mind. And there has just been so much passive house stuff happening lately. It's just
there has been a
nuts.
lot of passive house stuff going on all over the world. Of course, we're just finishing off the South Pacific Passive House conference as we speak right now in my part of the world, which is springtime here, and so things are starting to warm up, and the South Pacific conference, like a lot of conferences, went virtual this year. Heap of content there, and luckily I was lucky to get to listen to some of those presentations, but yeah, just a heap of content out there.
Indeed. Yeah, it's tricky to try to keep up for sure.
It is. But something a little bit different this week. We have a great interview. This was from a while back now. I had a conversation with Harley, Weston from, the project is called Vanquish and the company is Solaire. We'll have a catch up about this interview afterwards to get your thoughts on it. But fascinating character. Harley Weston spent about 12 years drilling and exploring for minerals underneath the ground, mostly in the northeastern part of Australia. And when he wasn't drilling himself, he was managing other people who did. Now, mineral exploration is big business in Australia, as it is around the world. It's made a lot of people very wealthy, but it's not exactly what you would think of immediately when you think about sustainability or health and well-being, or even necessarily energy efficiency. So Harley eventually moved on from that. He also spent some time flying around in a helicopter and established a charter company, which was really just living out one of his dreams of becoming a commercial pilot. But in 2017, Harley teamed up with two other brothers, James and Paul McElhenny, and together they formed Solaire Properties. And their mission is to disrupt and redefine the building industry. And as Harley puts it, Solaire Properties is about buildings that are equal parts luxurious, eco-conscious, and technologically advanced. And their first project, which is Vanquish, certainly embodies all those aspects and has garnered quite a lot of attention, not just from the Passive House community, but also from mainstream media. So I started out by asking Harley a bit about his background and how he went from helicopters to housing. Thanks, Harley, for your time. You're a busy man, so I really appreciate you coming on the show. Let's start out by a bit of background in how you got into the building industry, because you spent a bit of time doing lots of interesting things, including flying around in helicopters.
Yeah, it's been sometimes when I tell the story of what I've been up to for the last decade or two, you end up sounding like one of those people that seem like they're 100 years old. But my background, actually, I started out of school in mineral exploration, believe it or not. So I used to work for the devil in some ways, where I had my own exploration drilling business, and I worked for BHP Mitsubishi Alliance for nearly 15 years in the Bowen Basin, exploring their metallurgical and thermal coal resources. So I learned a lot, but particularly around geology. So I guess that's really what gave me a passion for science. And I also got to see how big systems and big wheels turn slowly, and wastage, and it's sort of, I guess, the frustrations of what I saw there really sort of drove some of the passions. But particularly watching doing a lot of core sampling and seeing the carbon cycles of the planet through the last 5 species in the last 300 million years, you start to get an appreciation of how it does affect the planet and how entire species can just disappear for various different reasons. So I got out of that in end of 2014. And then I obviously needed a break because I'd been there since I was younger. So since I was at school, so I spent another 2.5 years, believe it or not, from 30-year-old, building a botanical garden, collecting rare and exotic fruit trees and plant species. So I now have probably just under 2,000 plant species, and the second biggest collection of rare and exotic fruit species in the country. And that was just a bit of a hobby.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like a very financially sensible venture.
No, there wasn't wasn't many financial decisions sort of involved in that. That was more just decompressing from an executive business life or corporate type, and then having lots of staff. And obviously, I had a passion for plants and biodiversity and just an amazing fruit and these types of things. So I guess that was in some way of relaxing. And probably to add to that, some of it wasn't my choice, because I think 4 weeks after I exited that business, I had a Category 5 cyclone Marsha, that hit on the February the 17th, 2015, and it annihilated about 70 or 80% of all of my property, which was mainly like rainforest, and took the roof off my house and destroyed everything. So it took me about 8 months just to clean that up, and then while you're cleaning it up, you might as well make even more mess. And so I just went hard and created an extensive fruit orchard. So.
Wow. For those that aren't familiar with where you are, can you just give us a bit of an idea of your location and what the climate's like where you are?
That's in Yeppoon, so that's probably only, say, 7 kilometres from the coastline, and it's just near Rockhampton. So I spent about 2 years looking for a microclimate that would have fertile soils, rich volcanics, great underground water supply, and and just a good aspect for growing various types of plants, and also a sloping block so that I could grow chill species like your stone fruit and cherries and those types of almonds and these types of things down the bottom of the block, and also had a lower pH, and then I could grow subtropical and tropical species as it went up the hill. So I just sort of taught myself that over a couple of years and collected them in a bit of trial and error, and that lasted through to about 2016. When I sort of established I put in a big 4-kilometre irrigation system, computerized, so it would take care of itself. And then I moved to Canada for a little bit to fly helicopters, and then I came back to moved to Brisbane, and I finished flying choppers down here I finished training for another year, and that's when Solaire came about. Pretty well then.
And why was that? Why from helicopters to plants to property?
The reason being, I suppose, helicopters was a passion that I'd always wanted to do. I'm just fascinated by them, and I also love physics and science. So that just seemed like a very complicated piece of equipment to try and get your head around. And they're just extremely versatile. The sound, what they can do. And you can fly. So I think flying's in my blood because my mother's side, my whole family's pilots, all airplane pilots. But I think choppers are just probably more fun. And I guess for me the first idea, like I can't build a kid's cubby house out of cardboard boxes, so it's not really my skill set. But I sort of, when I was building the garden, I had the idea that I wanted to build some sort of world's first. So I tried to look at building a carbon positive home, but you can't get your ambitions and your abilities mixed up. So I started looking for something that was practical, and I had a friend from Yeppoon who's Paul McElhenny. He's one of my business partners, and those guys are fourth generation builders and have built many homes, and particularly high quality, high value type homes. They wanted to get into property development in Brisbane, and when all three of us had just moved down, and I made a commitment to myself that I'd never invest in anything else again in my life that didn't have something to do with sustainability or the ability to generate connections that would get you towards a more sustainable future. So I wanted to build sustainable homes, and they wanted to do property development, and they specialise in building executive homes. So then we started to mesh those two ideas together for around about a year while I was flying, and they were working on one of our first projects. Then that's how we came up with Solaire, that we would build high-end sustainable smart homes. And the reason that we started with the high end was because we had a little bit of a benchmark on where we could work, and obviously in those suburbs with a high suburb profile, good city views, and high value, the margins were better there. So as we started to play around with, putting $100,000 worth of home automation and energy efficiency into a house, that your worst possible outcome was to try and break even or minimize any losses for your research and development. So we just set about just trialing battery systems and trialing new materials and basically overcapitalizing. So the plan was just to make sure that we could explore that market and generate some change without being foolish.
You mentioned on your website that you believe that the building industry needs disrupting. What is it in particular do you think that needs disrupting in the building and construction industry?
The other option would say is what doesn't need disrupting, but there's a fair bit that needs disrupting. I think some of it is one, the energy efficiency with the homes that aren't being built, with lots of gaps and poor insulation, no cross ventilation. But above all, the thing that I felt needed disruptive the most was people are spending 20 to 30 or longer their entire life paying off a home, and I wasn't okay with seeing people just building homes as quick and as fast and as cheap as they can to maximize profits, and not creating a building that is going to last as long as it's going to take someone to pay it off, and requiring large amounts of energy and not being overly comfortable. Where for an extra 10%, you could build a longer lasting, more comfortable home. And if you did that enough and got it to a scale, you could bring that percentage back down, and you can create a home that's cheaper to run, that's more comfortable, lasts longer, and just make it only within 5 to 10% of the normal build, and just to add value to both sides of the marketplace, really.
Do you think you have a slight advantage having come completely from outside the industry, that you're not really you're not locked into a certain way of doing things? You sort of think coming at it from a totally different angle?
I definitely think so, and I think that's common across most industries. The term fresh eyes, where people come in and say, well, why are we doing that? And sometimes, like we used to in mining, sometimes that would be someone from a different department, or even just the green hat, someone who's just turned up, and they would see something because when you've been there for a lot, you become immune to it. And I guess I also spent a lot of time, and when I was in mining, I employed a lot of people, and I'm from a very young age, and you didn't know what you didn't know. So I spent a lot of time just studying human behaviour patterns, cycles in government, cycles in trends, and these types of things, and knowing like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just general where we have to go based on our international commitments, the sustainable development goals, legislate. We know that this is where we have to go. And a lot of businesses are already starting to develop these types of products and new materials and better ways of doing things. And we see simple things like we start with no plastic straws, and then keep cups, and then biodegradable packaging, and then a lot of corporate social responsibility on a higher level. So we knew that's where we had to go. So I just thought that there's a gap there where we could start to build more innovative homes and better homes, and that there would be a market for it, if not now, in 5 years.
Do you find people in this industry, and particularly those that are really into sustainability, probably been doing it for their whole lives, do they struggle a bit with your background if they kind of look into your past? Oh, gee, I don't know about this guy. Like you said, he was the dark side. Is that how does that sit with what you're doing now?
I normally highlight it straight away because I'm more than happy to say that I'm a walking hypocrite.
But are you?
No, I'm
Do you
not.
think that because you sound like more in the same way that farmers, ironically, kind of love their animals before they send them to slaughterhouse? That you were on the land, you understand how the earth is made, probably more than anyone, by virtue of that exploration and contact with everything, and kind of that responsibility of putting, digging up minerals and resources. Does that not give you more of an insight than most people would have?
I believe it does because not only did you get to see the scientific history, basically the geological history and the time frames of how it got there, I also spent literally from 17 to 30 largely out in the bush on the back of because exploration is always out in dusty little tracks right out into the wilderness. So you also got to see the environment, like probably similar to the way the indigenous would have done. You could by the time I left there, you could pick if it was going to be a dry season or a wet season based on how the trees were behaving, how they were flowering, these types of things. So that's where it really got interesting with plants because you could tell just by watching those. Secondly to that, you got to work with a lot of humans, and you also got to see how big companies work. So when you're working with BHP and Anglo and Rio and these types of companies, they're doing things on a massive scale. Like you're talking huge operations with many cogs. So you got to see like how the system worked and like process improvement and where waste was, and how rather than try and even something as simple as the difference between metallurgical coal and thermal coal. You know what I mean? And rather than, for me, it's like protesters have their place, but if you want to change something, you need to provide the solution rather than complain about it and say we should get away from that. Well, how do we get away from it? Because we can't just stop one thing today and then life goes on. We have to phase things out. We have to be thinking ahead, innovating, generating. And it might not be we get rid of coal, but we might reduce it by 60% and replace it with, coffee bean cubes or whatever people are starting to come up with now. So I think it definitely gives you an upper hand in some ways, but I generally I'm not afraid to speak about my past. That's where I learned how to be sustainable by seeing how damaging and the waste. And to be fair, I still fly around in helicopters that burn 5 miles a hill. But it starts a lot of conversations that lead to sustainability. So that's all I can rest on my hands on that one. To be fair.
You also promote some fairly stunning solutions that include electric vehicles and energy management. I imagine that you've got some ideas on where the whole energy sector is going, particularly in a pretty resource reliant economy like Australia. What do you see as the future there?
I think we have to keep on going for low hanging fruit. A wholesale change is inevitable, but it takes a lot of time, particularly when there's legislation tied up in there. There's a lot of players. And I think renewable energy is not one of those things like coal. If you have a look at the statistics on coal and where how many kilowatts, I think 1 ton generates. Don't quote me on this, like 2,000 kilowatts. It's just ridiculous amount of energy. Whereas renewable energy, you have to take it from everywhere you can get, whether it's tidal, wave, wind, sun, the whole lot, for it to even add up. So I think virtual power plants is something that I think is a low hanging fruit. Virtual power plants for the listeners of VPPs is basically where you have smart metering inside the house. And grids were always set up for electricity to flow in one direction, and then that was altered with solar and then solar batteries and then feeding back to the grid. But VPPs is when you can plug in a whole network of houses, and start to turn it on and off different, like basically one computer is logged into all those houses, and it can start to change the energy usage of houses remotely so that it can take the fluctuations out of the grid and maintain stability and stop so much energy loss in transmission, to put things simply. I think embedded.
Is this part of your overcapitalization?
No, VPPs, no one's really got them down yet, because you've got the generators, the retailers, and the network owners, and there's a lot of people tussling for it. But I go down every year to the Clean Energy Council All Energy Conference in Melbourne, and year upon year you see a lot of people trying, but there's just so many things in the way, because there's a lot of parties that have to come to an agreement, and then it's different state by state as well. I think that's why the embedded energy embedded energy networks, or microgrids, have the upper hand in some ways, because you can build a subdivision of houses, and this is one of Solaire's primary sort of goals. Originally, our first house was market test, see if there was an appetite for it. But my eventual goal, I'd love to build, say, a 50-house subdivision with a industrial battery system in the middle of it. Solar panels on every home, well-built homes across ventilation, almost like a Canberra ring, staggered houses, so garden beds, so you've got cool air coming through the neighbour's garden into your house, and then you become the energy retailer, and then it becomes a body corporate, but it's only really long-term asset replacement cost for the industrial battery. And then as long as you can produce that electricity cheaper within that subdivision, then it's in the interest of the landholders and the occupants to live that way. But again, they're in their infancies. I know that some people have done it, so hats off to those who have. We're still a little bit small at the moment, and I'll never put my hand up and say that I'm the expert at this. I have the ideas, but there's experts in their fields that I encourage to reach out, because we're very keen, and what we'd like to do is tap in what we know, our building skills, and then do some sort of collaborative format to deliver something like this.
And it seems that your initial test in the market has gone okay. You've moved on to bigger and better things. Does the model look promising?
Yes and no. We haven't been that profitable yet, largely because of different reasons. One, getting through council regulations. Second, and I'll say this lightly and not so lightly at the same time, neighbours that just like to be annoyed, just like to get angry over nothing, that create long hold-ups. That's been a big one for us at Vanquish, just completely unnecessary. And obviously, there's been a lot of uptake for a business that's only been in the game for 2.5 years. We've won multiple awards. We've really done well as a business. Our plan was to run for 5 years before we would start to be able to capitalise on what we've achieved. But there's definitely a buy-in. What we'd like to do is we understand that to be truly sustainable, the houses that we're building, with Vanquish aside, you're increasing the size of a house using more resources, etc. So by default, it's not really, and that's definitely been a criticism that I've had in the past, and that's fair. But what we'd like to do is do all the research and development, which what we've done. I think after Vanquish, I think we've done enough R&D now, and we're now looking to scale, learn what was bang for buck, what's cost effective, what's affordable, what makes sense. We've created some better collaborators now, and then we're going to shrink those homes so that we still have our same values, high value, high quality, long lasting, but bring it down into something that's affordable, so that we can bring our homes to more people and actually.
Is it the Elon Musk school of business of testing with the luxury and then bringing it down to the more affordable option for the everyday consumer?
Well, that's the third time someone said that to me, but I guess it is when you think about it. But that definitely. I didn't really think about that until it's been raised. It's actually the second time in a week that someone said that to me. But I guess that's what that is. Yeah.
Well, you've touched on. I mean, you mentioned it as well, and you're pretty open about the fact these are high-end homes, and you're combining luxury and sustainability.
Mm.
And I can imagine that some people think that they are a dichotomy, but they do work together, can't they? You don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Well, I guess the two of the sort of taglines that we sort of came up with when we were generating the idea was, how do we influence the influencers through affluence so that we can and the second one was, how do we make it look and feel and smell like a mansion but it's sustainable? It's basically like putting some sexy into sustainability. So when people said, I live in a sustainable home, people are like, oh, it must be small, or it's a yurt, or it's a mud brick, or it's made out of bloody straw bales or something like that. But we're like, no. Sustainability is the new way of living, and you can build a house that is everything you want, but you can make it sustainable. This is how we did it. These are the materials that we used, and our goal is to get that price point down to within 5% of building a normal home.
What is Vanquish? For those that haven't seen it, how would you sum it up?
Vanquish is, and I'm happy for anybody to check me on this. Vanquish is the most advanced house to be built on Australian soil to date. I would strongly suggest. Vanquish is a Solaire home. It's designed by Joe Adset Architects, who's one of the leading architects here in Brisbane. It's perched up on the side of a hill, looking out towards the city with amazing city views. It's completely sustainable like we always do, but we've really taken this one to the next level. So all the cladding on the outside of the house is WeatherTex, which is a carbon negative product. So it actually stores more carbon in it than it is used during its manufacturing process. It's got the recycled concretes in, partly recycled tiles, chemical-free paints, freshwater pools, the whole lot. But the kicker is that it is a fully certified and was the largest certified passive house in Australia when we started, but I think someone's just done some bigger GFA than us. But it's fully certified. It looks like we're going to achieve Passive House Plus, and it's the first time that anyone's attempted it in a subtropical environment, particularly at latitude 23. There was someone who has one in Stanthorpe, so credit given to them. They're the first one in Queensland. But any Queenslander would know that Stanthorpe is where you grow apples. It is freezing cold. So that's what passive house, as you would know. You are a very educated man in that field. So we're trying to make a passive house, and almost even in the PHPP, we had to reverse a lot of the spreadsheets to get it to cool down instead of heat up.
Well, yeah, for a start, you have to turn it around so it's facing the wrong way, as everyone does in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
But what have been some of those unique challenges of essentially building a luxury home? You want to keep it at a nice indoor temperature, but I guess humidity. What's the ambient humidity in that region?
Mate, I'd be lying if I said that I knew the annualized average, but it's not uncommon in summertime to be 80 to 100%. Commonly 60 to 70%, but like summer's a good 70 or 80, quite often. So we had to put in a dehumidifier unit up in the roof that's wired into the HRV or ERV to make sure that we compensated for that, so we don't have any condensation inside the home, and that we get to that it actually it feels like top temperature. So that was something that we had to do. We had to put in, and again, this might be common. I'm not going to profess to be. This is our first passive house. Some different modelling in the walls to make sure we didn't get mold build up. So like extra wrapping inside the wall, and we had to have measure all the dew points and this type of thing, so we wouldn't get condensation inside the walls. But above all, being an architecturally designed house, it had a lot of glazing. So
or has?
It has a lot of glazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It had more, but it had louvers and that sort of thing. So we removed those. But to give you an idea, downstairs there's probably 30 meters, I reckon, of probably maybe a little bit, no, be close to probably say 20, 25 meters of full sliding stacker doors, so you can open the whole house up The goal
Yeah,
was,
it's a double whammy. It's not just glass, but it's also sliding glass, which is
which is
doubly hard.
hard to airtight seal. This particularly to get less than a 0.6 air change. So that was a challenge, and obviously then when you have such large areas of glass, it's quite hard to get the insulation values or the R values up to where they need to be. So therefore, the other areas of your house, you have to have shading and extra insulation in your actual solid walls. So we ended up running with a triple glazed argon filled low emissivity Viridian glass. So if you can put that into a calculator, it wasn't cheap.
No, I can imagine that alone would make it pretty unique in Queensland. I wouldn't think there'd be too many triple glazed houses up there.
No, we really wanted to sort of, again, along the same lines as Solaire, we just wanted to demonstrate that. Don't get lost in these ideas, and you talk about passive house, some people just tune out. They're like, oh yeah, what's that, or it's too hard to think about. We were just trying to demonstrate you can live in an architecturally designed house within 2 kilometres of the city. You can. People think that because it's airtight that it's going to be stuffy and that you might get mold, and whereas the complete opposite. It's actually got better airflow, better ventilation. It's cleaner. But then to offset that was if it's a perfect spring day, and any Queenslander would know that, you just slide the whole house open and let the beautiful breeze come through while you have a barbecue, and you can. We just wanted to demonstrate that you can have the best of both worlds and just show people that this is another way that you can live, and this house is super healthy and super clean and super comfortable.
If there ever was a passive house design book, which there isn't really, but there is an idea that people have, a concept of a boring square box. You've either totally ignored that or completely thrown it out and gone with something that's absolutely something different. I'm super excited with similar projects and architects I've spoken to around Australia that are really, I can start to see that more Australian vernacular of high performance home that is including things like ridiculously big openings and true indoor-outdoor flow, where you have these opening walls essentially that open up, but still you can close them when you want to, and you're still achieving this high level of performance. So I think it's super exciting that we're not just taking the design vernacular and transplanting it here. We're actually thinking about the science and redefining what that means for our climate.
I think it's important that we do, and changes like this that we need. Not just because we need to get carbon under control and meet all of our government's promises and just generally being responsible as a human being. There's a lot of people out there, and our biggest purchases to date have mainly bought our properties because of low chemicals and hypersensitivities and these sorts of things for children. There's a lot of people out there with conditions these days and sensitivities, allergies, and the cost of power is going through the roof. It just makes a whole lot of sense to live in a house that's filtered to 4 microns, pollen filtered. The air that leaves the house is cleaner than when it comes in, and all you really have to do is seal the house and design it in a certain way. It was probably a little bit of a headache for us, probably because we made the decision to go passive house after we designed the house. So we had to sort of work backwards and then come back forward again. But if we were to do it again, or we are going to do it again, it'd be a lot easier. The principle is not that hard. I think the hardest part is getting your head around what's required, getting airtight wrap, across multiple floors and these types of things. But once you've done it, it just makes a whole lot of sense. And for anyone who hasn't been in the passive house, find someone who's got one, or you're welcome to come and check out ours. Just jump on our website or Instagram. Once you're inside and you close those doors, you're in a passive house. You can the dog next door stop barking because you can't hear it anymore. And it's clean, it's comfortable.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I know that there's been a lot of learning in this process, and you've documented a lot of that. There's some great videos out there of showing the detail, which is awesome. Particularly things like thermal bridging, which I think is reversed in some ways. You've been gone to great lengths to keep the heat out.
Yep.
Whereas in most cases, thermal bridging is all about not having cold spots on the inside, but you've been very conscious of that condensation forming and also not leaking heat into the building. So I imagine there's been a lot of learning on the way.
Huge learning, and I'll take my hat off to my business partners, James and Paul. Paul's our builder, and James McElhenny, they're brothers. He's done a lot of between John Monahan as well. I'm not sure you might be familiar with him from Eco Lateral up here. Those guys and several other people that did some pro bono work to be as a collaboration with this. And then I'll take my hat off to those guys because there was a lot of work in doing the thermal modeling on not just on your sophites that hit your steel members underneath the floor, but your window frames and just the shading and the whole lot. Very incredible amount of work. But once you've done it, I think it becomes a lot easier. So I can see why people are starting to raise attention. And those videos, I guess that was it was such a big deal that it was good to capture it. So I think that's going to be a 10 or 11 part series. I think we've got I'm filming episode 8 in the morning actually. So.
Nice. We'll put some links up to those. And obviously, you mentioned Instagram. Where else can people go to check it out and see the progress?
Instagram's probably the best way. If you jump on Instagram, just at Solaire Properties, or you can check out the Instagram TV, which is one of the buttons at the top. Pretty well all of our videos are on YouTube. Our website's there to be viewed, but we're doing a website revamp over the coming weeks. But Instagram's probably our primary channel at the moment to check out any sort of videos and footage, and then just stay tuned because we'd hope to. Obviously, COVID's thrown a bit of spanner in the works, but anyone's feel free to reach out, and hopefully we can get some people through as it comes to fruition.
Absolutely. Any final tips for someone who's maybe embarking on this, either as a professional builder or maybe looking to build their own place in the near future? What would you say to them as a tip?
I'd say three tips to 3 different levels. If you're a builder or a developer, hold on to your hat. I'd encourage you to keep on doing it. It will take a little bit of commitment and time, but it is going to be the future. If you're building your own house from scratch, I'd say highly recommend it. It'll pay dividends even if you spend a little bit extra now, either getting extra size or these types of things. It'll pay dividends. And if you're someone who can't afford but you're interested and you want to do anything on your house, then I'd just start with what you can. Obviously, building to a passive house level is quite extensive, but there's a lot of things that you can do to your house just to make them sustainable, because sustainability is the most important thing, and passive house, I feel, sits at the top end of a sustainable home.
Awesome. Hey, thank you very much for your time today, Harley. Really appreciate it, and we will definitely look forward to seeing that project and others in the future come to fruition as well.
Absolutely. Matthew, thank you, and thanks, listeners, and have a great weekend.
And that was Harley Weston of Solaire Properties in Queensland in Australia, northeast Australia. Pretty warm climate up there. And he was talking a bit about their first project, Vanquish, which is certainly a pretty impressive, luxurious, sustainable passive house. What were your thoughts about that, Zach?
Well, super interesting. And, we get to talk with a lot of pioneers, and he's clearly one of those in Australia. And it's so that's great to see. And it's also a reminder, I think, for those of us in North America and maybe other, I'm sure in Europe, which is even more well established in terms of passive house. I think that we've had the luxury, to use that word, in North America to pivot our focus in passive house to larger projects, to multifamily projects, to affordable projects. And that has allowed us to kind of bring together, for many of us, values around urbanism and the, moving away from the single occupant automobile to mass transit, and the kind of a big holistic picture of sustainability, right? And to allow to bring passive house into that kind of context, which is so, I think it will end up being really critical if we're going to be successful in addressing climate change. But when passive house started,
it needs to be more than just luxury houses, right?
Exactly. We're not going to save the planet with luxury houses in the suburbs, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say that this work is not super important. And I think when passive house was first getting going in the Northwest of the U.S., which is where I saw it developing it firsthand, single family houses in wine country, big houses, luxury houses, are
with flash cars,
high, yeah, all of that. That's where passive house really started to take, got its first foothold. So it was wealthy people who wanted to do something meaningful with their dream house. So, and that was really important. I mean, that's how things got going here. I mean, that's not solely true. I'm sure that there were more affordable projects, and there were definitely people who were kind of DIYers doing it more on a budget. But many of I think of Karuna House, which is a project by Holst Architects and built by Hammer and Hand. And I was in Hammer, doing marketing at Hammer and Hand at the time. This is amazing house. It was my first passive house that I stepped into, a total life-changing experience. Just the air in there was just amazing. And it was out in wine country in Yamhill County. But that was a project that we documented on video and showed lessons learned. And, and the same thing is going on with Harley's project as well. So it's, I think it's easy for us to forget, I think, in North America where we were just 10 years ago in terms of the market adoption, and to forget how important those first luxury projects were to helping us get where we are now, I guess.
Yeah. I think it is easy for those of us who've been working the space, and we're trying to get passive house in front of policymakers, and we're trying to build the case for passive house schools and passive house social houses, passive house multi-residential buildings, and say, no, you can do a passive house and it doesn't have to cost that much more. And then there's a tendency for us to think, is this type of project helpful, or is it hindering that message? I think one of the key things about what you were just talking about is that life-changing experience of going into a passive house. And that's what we just need more passive houses. And if a politician happens to step inside this house, as they probably will do because it's getting lots of attention, or as mainstream media step inside it and start hearing things like airtightness. No one's ever built an airtight house in Queensland or in Brisbane. It's just this warm, beautiful climate. So they're seeing these things for the first time, and I think it's a really important first step, foot in the door, get some of these things established. And yes, we don't want to lose sight of the bigger goal, but I think we can, in the industry, learn a lot from this type of project, not least of which is about marketing, because something that Vanquish have done really well is get media attention. And that's something that I think the passive house community can learn from, is how we tell our story, how we get the message out there to not just to ourselves, but beyond our own community, and get other people to pay attention. Something that I picked up just really quickly, Harley made a really interesting point about the fact that all our houses are really expensive right now, but they're cheap, and that there's a big discrepancy between the quality that we tend to build our houses, and the fact that people are spending 20, 30 or more their entire lives paying off these damn things. So it actually makes sense to up the quality a small amount and actually have something that's worth spending your life paying off, rather than having this huge mortgage for something that's really not that good a quality. And it's an interesting perspective that we do have this big discrepancy right now between quality and cost, and that's partly that's exacerbated for us down in this part of the world, because we're a bunch of little islands separated from from a big supply, and we've got relatively low density population as well. So things do tend to be a bit more expensive. So they're certainly disrupting the market, and I think that's quite exciting. I think this is the first chapter, I hope, for Solaire Properties, and I look forward to seeing what they come up with once Vanquish is all finished. I also encourage people to check out all the media. There's lots of videos on YouTube, and made beautiful pictures, stunning images of the Vanquish project. But definitely check it out and have a look at some of the videos as well. And also just ask, I think, what can we learn from this type of project and the marketing, and how can we incorporate that to expand our message. All right. We've got lots more going on. We've just wrapped up a couple of big conferences, but I gather there's still a whole bunch of more stuff happening, Zach.
Oh, yes, there sure is. So one thing that's going on, and actually I think the deadline will hit when this podcast is published on in North America. It'll be Monday, October 19th. The deadline just got extended for the FIAS 6th annual design competition. And it's open to passive house projects that are certified and in the FIAS database, but also in the PHI database and other databases like the passive house, the version of passive house in Belgium. So check that definitely if you if you have a little time today and you just got onto the podcast when we published it, you can submit your project. We also have more conferences, some really great ones, including the Passive House Maine Fall Forum, which is on October 21st through 23rd. And that actually kicks off at the Global Passive House Happy Hour this coming Wednesday. The keynote will be at the happy hour, and it will be with Susan Jones, who's a great architect and practitioner who uses a lot of CLT. So it'll be interesting to kind of talk about CLT and embodied carbon and passive house. Plataforma PEP is having its conference in Spain, a bunch of content in Spanish and in English, and that kicks off October 21st and runs for a couple of weeks intermittently. FIAS is having its series of hootenannies and also the design competition award ceremony the week of October 26th through 30th. Passive House Canada has its summit in December 8th through 10th. So tons of great stuff there. And we will share all this in the show notes. And also Passive House Accelerator is having our third Passive House Component Spotlight. And we'll be doing this on October 29th, and it will feature Partel and Hugh Wierisky, the founder of Partel and the technical director. He's going to be talking about their smart technical system for airtight buildings. So as always, lots on tap.
Lots going on. Hey, I'd love to get your feedback on this episode and others. If you've got ideas, thoughts, comments for future episodes, then contact us, podcast at Passive House Happy Hour. No? Passive House Accelerator.
That's right.
Podcast at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Love to get your feedback. And please do, if you can head over to Apple and leave a rating and review, then it helps with our marketing and helps get the message out there to more people so they can listen into this and other future episodes. We'd really appreciate that. Hey, good to chat, Zach. We'll catch up with you again next week.
Likewise. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
The Passive House podcast and all of the programs of Passive House Accelerator are made possible by generous support from our sponsors. So I want to say thank you to them. Our founding sponsors are Baxt Ingui Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, RDH Building Science, StoCorp, and Zola Windows. And our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. Thank you.